Happy Sunday, y'all. Happy Sunday. Sorry, I'm a couple of minutes late. Hope everybody is well. Happy Sunday, Rosalind. Evelyn. Glad to see y'all. Thank you for being here. Hope you are having a great day so far. All right, I'm going to give it a minute or so. I see some eyes on the live. Give folks time to get in the chat. I can tell my friends who don't know that I do YouTube, because they always call me. I think I should sing. Do y'all know I do YouTube? Why y'all not watching? Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. Hi, Audrey. Hi, everybody. Happy Sunday to you. Deborah. Allison. Happy Sunday. Happy to see y'all. And rising to you. Welcome. New name. Hey, Bridget. Good to see you. Hope everybody is having a great Sunday. I actually am mostly prepared. I wanted to. It's been a minute since I have done anything around the frequently asked questions. Hello. So I am going to be doing some of that today. Millie, welcome. And so I'm somewhat prepared. All right, so I'll go ahead and get started. Hi, Judith. Good to see you in the chat. It is, Bridget. Thank you. It is. Hello. And I never wear it. I bought it in New Orleans maybe a couple of years ago, and I very rarely wear it. I had it hemmed and everything. It was a bit too long, and I very rarely wear it. So I was looking for something to wear today, and this is what I got. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so let me do my intro. We'll get started. Glad to see y'all here in the chat. Thank y'all for being here. Happy Sunday to everybody. As I introduce myself, I am Jewel Pearson for the new folks. Hey, Day, good to see you. As I introduce myself, hi, WLJ. Hello. I built a fancy tiny house in 2015 because I don't believe you have to give up luxury to go tiny. And also, I built it because I want to live in no freedom. That is my why. And we're going to be talking about the why today, too. Thank you, Evelyn. I am a lifestyle architect and strategist, a longtime tiny house advocate for intentional living and representation in the movement. I do want us to see ourselves here, be represented in the movement. And after living tiny for now over a decade, I use my expertise and my experience to help others create intentional, self-defined lives through design, home design, downsizing, community, all of the things. And if you'd like to connect with me, once this video goes live, all the way at the bottom of the description, you'll find the links from the video to connect, get on my calendar, and take a course, all of the things. The links are in the video description. And I always say it's not just about the tiny house. It's also about clarity. It's about alignment. It's about liberation. And that's what we talk about over here. So let's get into what we're talking about today. I'll remind y'all to go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications so that you will know when stuff is going live over there. So let's do that. Go ahead and do that now. I appreciate y'all. And so today we are talking about the essential framework for your tiny house journey. And there's a lot to it, but fortunately, I have, as I've shared, been in this movement for over a decade. And so I have done a lot of the work to hopefully make it easier for you all. And so that's what we're going to be doing and talking about today. And I'm going to walk you through my framework. I'm trying to get my screens together because I'm also going to share a screen today. Walk you through the framework for getting started with your tiny house journey, so that you don't have to deal with the overwhelm. And you can kind of think of this as your roadmap for your tiny house journey. And this will help you understand what matters now, what you need to be doing now, what can wait until later, the important things to be thinking about, all of that kind of stuff. That's what this framework will help you with. And by the end of today's session, you should have at least 4 key steps, at least 4 at a minimum, to help you move forward in your tiny house journey, if that's the direction that you're going in. And as always, I have additional tools. I'll talk about my masterclass there. If there's additional help that you want, I have the tools available for you, and I'll talk about that too, so that you can do a deeper dive and get the help you need to move through and achieve your dream, if a tiny house is your dream. So the first thing I want to talk about is really the first part of the framework and why people struggle in this overall journey. One of the main reasons that people struggle is from overwhelm. There is a lot of information out there. There's a lot of conflicting information out there about tiny houses, buying a tiny house, building a tiny house, design. There's a whole bunch of information out there, and decision paralysis is real. And so that is one of the main reasons why people struggle, is because there's just so much information out there. And I will say that for me, in 2012, 2013, when I started, 2013, when I started doing the research, the problem was different at that point. There was very little information out there. And so that is why it took me a couple of years to do my research and do the thorough research, because there wasn't a lot of information out there. And there, again, part of it was that the information that was out there was conflicting. So there was the challenge of that, but it just wasn't a lot of information out there. And I've always shared that part of the reason that I've gone into designing the course and offering consultations, the work that I do, is because I really wanted to offer a solution for the conflicting information out there. And I also wanted to offer a solution that I wish had been available to me as I was going through my research. And so that is one of the reasons that I offer the courses, the help that I do. Another reason that people struggle is not knowing what to prioritize. Do I focus on my design? Do I focus on zoning and where I'm going to put my house? Do I focus on downsizing? Do I need to focus on all of it? And how do I focus on all of it? So and that's really important. Like, there's some steps to help you, because you can't do all the things at the same time. You really need to understand overall the requirements, and then be able to go back and make the decision to help you know what to prioritize. And so that is one of the things that stresses people out in this process, is knowing what to prioritize. Another struggle is mistakes from rushing into building or buying without a plan. A few weeks ago, I said one of the sessions I hosted was what I said I wish people would stop doing, which is buying land without understanding the zoning and then later being frustrated that they can't put a tiny house on wheels on it, or stepping out into working with the builder and not having done the due diligence. Due diligence is required. That is my word in the masterclass. That is the word that I use throughout. The due diligence, that is so important. It's also easier if you have the framework, the understanding. So somebody has helped you outline what the due diligence is. So one of the big things, the third thing that causes a lot of overwhelm is in rushing into building or buying without a plan. And then the fourth thing that is big in a struggle in the process is the fear of making a wrong choice or wrong move or wrong decision. And oftentimes what that leads to is what I mentioned again of earlier, the overwhelm from too much and conflicting information can cause decision paralysis, but so will fear of making the wrong decision. You end up just doing nothing because you don't know what to do. And so then you're stuck and you're stagnant. You're not doing anything because you just don't know what to do. So those are the key struggles to what prevents people from being successful, what prevents people from moving forward in this tiny house journey. Overwhelm from too much or conflicting information, not knowing what to prioritize, making mistakes from rushing into building or buying without a plan, and then the fear of making a wrong decision. Again, exactly why I developed my framework, because what it does is help you break down the process. First of all, help you understand the process and then break it down into manageable steps so that you can avoid some of these challenges that I've seen people make over the years. The masterclass is what I wish had been available to me. The masterclass I also talk about, and for years in the courses that I've offered, talk about the differences for this process for Black and Brown people, because there are differences throughout. And hey, Teresa, hey, Kitty. And that's something that I include in the conversations, because not only we experience it, but also counterparts need to understand what that looks like. So if they're trying to be the right person, they can be aware of what it is and also be helpful in those situations. And so all of that matters. All of that is part of what I have included in the courses. So there's really like a 4-part framework to your tiny house journey. The big piece, and it's throughout the masterclass, I talk about knowing your why, understanding your why. Your why is your foundation. Without understanding your why, that's how you end up making decisions based on trends or pressures from other people, pressures from a builder, pressures from my timeline is driving my process instead of the foundation of why. What is your why? And that is the big piece of the framework. What is your why? Your why could be because you want to have mobility. Your why could be you want to live off grid. Your why could be maybe you want to have extra income from rental. Maybe you don't personally want to live tiny, but you want to have extra income from possibly an ADU or a tiny house on wheels as an ADU. Each of those whys lead into different paths and approaches. And so knowing your why is so important. And I shared my why. I share my why all the time. My why was because I want to live in no freedom. understanding that why, that foundation, that my why has been the foundation of how it has driven my tiny house lifestyle, my tiny house build, my tiny house design, all the things from start to where I am right now were predicated by my why, because I want to live in no freedom. And so that is, thank you, Teresa. That is the foundation of your entire process. So remember, I said you were going to have 4 key steps to move forward with. That's key step number 1. Thank you so much, Teresa. Knowing your why, identifying your why. What is your why? And that is like your North Star throughout the entire process. That is your North Star that guides you through your tiny house journey. My why is because I want to live in no freedom. And the way I make moves with, and I've made moves over the last 10 years, have been guided by that as my North Star. And so in the masterclass, the very first week, we spend an entire week getting really clear on the why and the things surrounding the why, because it drives your design, it drives your budget, it drives your location. All of the decisions that you're making in this journey, hey there, Arnell, are predicated by your why. And we talk about week 1 in the masterclass. That is a big focus of week 1. Another key step is before you put together your design boards, before you are thinking about your floor plans, overall, you need to kind of understand the process and what goes into it. You need some understanding on zoning. You need some understanding on budget. You need some understanding on the timeline, how the budget and the timeline work with each other, how the budget, timeline, and your overall process fit together, and if your budget is driving the build, how that's going to impact your timeline. If your timeline is impacting the bill, is driving the bill, how that's going to impact your budget. These are the key things, the core of it. And if you don't understand that from the beginning, if you don't focus on having an understanding of those things from the beginning, this is where you can end up with challenges. And a lot of people skip this and they focus on just designing the tiny house, and then they end up paying for it later. Again, I did the video not so long ago about folks who are buying tiny houses, buying land and just assuming they can place a tiny house on it. It doesn't work that way. And if you don't know, thank you, Sadiq. I appreciate that. If you don't have an idea of the overall framework, understand the overall framework, then you kind of get messed up because you don't understand everything that's required to put it together. And we go step by step through zoning, we go through financing, we go through site prep, we go through all of the things in the masterclass so that you're not wasting money, time, all of the things. That's the last thing you want to do. I prefer to be able to help you set up for success. And then we talk about design in the masterclass. There are 3 key components to designing your house that are just as important as your why. It's important to know that a tiny house isn't just a small version of a regular house. In a tiny house, every inch matters. I have shared that It's one of the things as I talk about selecting a builder. Traditional home builders, everybody, a builder is going to tell you, if you reach out to a builder right now and ask them, can they build you a tiny house? They're going to say, absolutely. One thing about contractors, builders, plumbers, electricians, you rarely are going to meet one of them that says they can't do something. Can you do X, Y, Z? Of course. They don't have a clue, but they're going to tell you they can do it. A builder, a traditional home builder, can you build a tiny house? Absolutely. Because in their mind, it is the same thing as building a regular house, just in a smaller version. And that's not the case. Every inch in a tiny house matters. Oftentimes, builders who are building traditional houses will mess up something, and from in the build, and I'm like in the framing, in the general building process, they'll mess something up. But in a traditional house, it's not as visible, it's not as obvious, because we're dealing with hundreds, thousands of square feet. So if I'm off 2 or 3 feet as a builder building a regular house, it's not going to be as obvious. In designing my tiny house is 28 feet, the portion that is on the trailer. It is 28 feet long. It's 8'6" wide. I knew exactly how long my couch was. My house was designed, as I designed the plans, it was designed around different components that would be in the house. If my builder had been off an inch, my couch wouldn't have fit. Every inch in a tiny house matters. I knew of a woman who built a tiny house when I was building mine. She was actually on HGTV a few episodes after mine. She was tall. Her builder, I want to make sure I tell her story right. She hadn't worked as diligently with her builder in her house design, and he was trying to decide. There was going to be like a small closet she was building a smaller house. There was going to be a small closet like in the general living room area, small closet and a couch. And as he was building, he was trying to decide, like, something was a little bit off, and he needed to cut down on something. And so it was either going to be, I think she had a built-in couch. It was either going to be the length of the couch or the size of the closet. And he wanted to know, something is a little off, so I need to make up for this in either reducing the size of the couch or reducing the size of the closet to accommodate for whatever was off. He tried to call her. He didn't get in touch with her. And so he made a decision for her. And his decision was to cut down the size of the couch to give more space to the closet. And that meant remember I said she was tall. She could not lay the couch wasn't long enough for her to lay on the couch. And that had been important to her. He made that decision for her in her absence. I also talk about how to prevent that in the masterclass, because that in itself was a problem. But the fact that something was off, and again, probably a few inches, made a big difference in the overall success of her house. When you're dealing with a tiny house, every inch matters. It's not just a small version of a tiny house. One wrong move, one wrong choice, one wrong decision, as in her case, can make your house feel cramped, uncomfortable, instead of a space that you love. In the design intensive course, we walk and talk through layouts. We talk about finishes. We talk about creative solutions. So the house fits you, not you're trying to figure out how to fit into the house. That is one of the things that I've also shared over the years. There were quite a few other people who lived in tiny houses when I first built my house, 2014. It was a smaller group of people. You kind of knew people's houses, you knew them, because it wasn't a whole bunch of people. It was often divided by shows at that time too. I was on Tiny House Big Living. There was Tiny House Nation. So you kind of knew who was who. You saw their house and knew who belonged to the houses. Most of the people that are still in their houses today were the people who actually designed their own houses versus having somebody else make those decisions for them. The success of my house, the success for me being able to live in my house over a decade, has been because my house was designed for me. Design is so important to the success. I can still say I love my house. I've done some updates. Sadiq just pointed out my new bathroom update. I have done some updates, but I've not changed the core, the bones of my house. The update to my bathroom was superficial. It was not changing the size of my bathroom. I've added the add-on, but the core of my house is still the same house that it was when it was designed in 2014. The success of my house, the success of me still 10 plus years later enjoying my house, is so much in the design of the house. And design is so important. And that is one of the things that, one of the reasons that I added on this deep dive course, so that we talk about in the masterclass. We spend a lot of time, but there was also some additional information that is discussed in the design essentials course, the design intensive course. Rosalind is sharing, there's a guy in Metro Atlanta right now fighting to stay on land that he bought without doing his due diligence. It doesn't just happen with tiny houses. Like, zoning is so important for housing, traditional housing, for tiny houses. People often feel like, well, if I buy the land, it's my land. I should be able to do what I want with the land. In theory, that does make sense. You bought it, it's yours. But that's not how it works. And to be on the wrong side of zoning is going to impact everything. You won't have access to utilities. They can condemn your house. Builders won't be able to. There's a whole bunch that goes into it. So understanding, doing the due diligence is so important. Thank you, Evelyn. I appreciate that. Judith is saying, she hit it right on the money. I'm dealing with LA County and they are so money hungry. Contractors are seeing dollars from folks in need. Do your homework. Absolutely. Making executive decisions on something that I'm paying you to build. So I know, Sadiq, you're talking about my example of the builder who made a decision for the homeowner that didn't work for the homeowner. Sadiq is asking a question about zoning. Does zoning ever change frequently? So if you're approved to build a certain structure, can it change on you down the road later? So no, the overall answer is no. Zoning does change, and you can actually request to change zoning. So you could buy some land. An example is, as I'm trying to have conversations around building a tiny house community, the land that I am interested in is currently zoned as a campground. My interest is it would make it easier for the land to be zoned as an RV park. So you can petition for that zoning for the land to be changed. That is something that you would do up front prior to, do anything on the land. You'd want to petition that land, the zoning change for the land. Zoning changes that happen usually happen around things like eminent domain, when they come in and they're going to take the property, or years later when they decide, we want to, you've got some land, we want to build businesses, they'll come in and want to change the zoning. They do have to deal with you, the landowner. If you own the land, they want to change the land zoning, they are required by law to deal with you. You can, if they're going to go into eminent domain, then they'll ask up front nicely, and then at some point they'll start, bringing in the lawyers and want to change it, and stiff you on it. So, but it doesn't just arbitrarily change. There's a process. Yes, if you've built a home on some land, and you see it a lot in rural areas where people have built homes on land and they decide we're going to go through and put a highway here. But there's a whole process in going through and, offering that homeowner some money so that they can buy the land to do what they want to do. If that doesn't work, then, they go into that eminent domain. And the legal fight happens. Day is saying that zoning boards are sometimes prejudiced. I talk about that in the masterclass. Again, the conversation around the things that are important for us to know as Black and brown folks, that's included in the conversation. Zoning, building code enforcement are very much extensions of, most times, the good old boy network. These folks have been in their government jobs for many, many years. A lot of the things that we see happening in the world is represented in these government entities. And so zoning and building code enforcement is no different. Again, talked about this when I did the video the other week where I said stop buying land before you know, and expecting that you can put a tiny house on it. Giving them a reason to be racist. You bought the land and you just assume that you can put a tiny house on it. Now you got to go down and deal with these folks who are high on power, and racism is a thing. That's not going to go well for you, which is why it's important to do the work up front. I talk about, what is it? I always mess it up. How you get more flies with honey than whatever that thing is. Trying to deal with them up front from a place of conversation is going to go better for you versus you've done something and now we don't always have the opportunity to ask for forgiveness later. That saying, whatever, make the decision then ask for forgiveness later. That doesn't always work for us. It very rarely works for us. And so instead of putting yourself in that position where you're now in a fight with them, then you do better approaching it in a totally different way. I'm also not opposed to, because we know that a lot of these entities are there's a lot of racism embedded in these entities. I'm not opposed to having somebody who doesn't look like you go and deal with them, because oftentimes they get better and different answers. Um, Code enforcement, zoning is such a interesting entity to deal with, because you can potentially call on Monday and get one answer, and then call on Wednesday, speak to somebody else and get a totally different answer. Call on Monday and Billy had his coffee and he tells you, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Call on Wednesday and Billy didn't have his coffee, and him and his wife had an argument, and Billy's pissed off, and Billy said, I ain't say nothing like that. That is zoning. That is why I also recommend that you get things in writing. So if again, if you know what you're dealing with up front, it's easier for you to be able to make the right decisions, and the framework, knowing the framework, the masterclass, the courses that I have designed helps with that, because it makes you aware of things that you may not be aware of right now. The better prepared you are, the more successful you'll be. So absolutely, that is a whole thing. And then so step one, remember I said, I'm always trying to give y'all some pointers. So I said, but when you leave here, you should have 4 points. Point one is knowing your why is the foundation of all of this. Step two is understanding the key first steps. What do I need to know? What do I need to be aware of in this journey? Your key steps. And then step three is your design essentials. That's so important. That is leading you, that's the lead in to this entire process. And then step three is avoiding pitfalls with your systems. And the systems, like, until I built a tiny house, I'd never be somewhere talking about a toilet. That just wasn't something. I'd be somewhere having a conversation about. Now I can talk about toilets just because it's so important to your tiny house journey. What type of toilet are you going to have? Knowing your plumbing for the house, knowing your heating, knowing the electrical setup, insulation, all of that stuff. It's not fun stuff to talk about. It's not as glamorous as your design choices, but it's so important as part of your design, because it will make or break your comfort and your safety. And you want to be as safe as possible. Insulation, safety in a tiny house. There are some key things to consider there. Choosing the wrong heating system or not understanding how you need to heat a tiny house could mean that in the wintertime you are freezing. I talk about winterization of a tiny house. Not knowing that kind of stuff can mean you have some frozen pipes and you don't have no water. Like that, all of that stuff is important. And it's also important whether you are a DIYer. You need to know it, obviously, if you're a DIYer, but it's also important for you to know if you are working with a builder. That way you can, as a DIYer, as working with the builder, that gives you the knowledge that you should have so that you can ask the right questions. You can make the smart and right decisions, and if said builder is doing the right thing for you. It's important. The more knowledge you have, the more successful you are in your tiny house. Me knowing the design of my house backward and forward like the back of my hand, I have shared with my in conversations, intimate circle conversations. was everything to the success of my tiny house, working with my builder. The research that I had done prior to building around how I wanted my house to be insulated. Um, the research around the systems that I wanted to have. I wanted to, on my list of key components for my design, is I wanted endless hot water. I didn't want to deal with a 3-gallon water tank where I have 10 minutes to lather up and rinse off, because then the water is going to be cold. Endless hot water was on my list. Researching to understand what I needed to do to achieve that. All of that is important. I can tell you right now, if I had to take a shower for a couple of minutes, lather up, rinse out, and get off, that would have got old within the first 3 months. Absolutely not. So, your systems is very important. Not understanding the R factor for the insulation you need for the area that you intend to live in. I talk about for park model houses, and we've talked about the difference in the types of tiny houses. So park model houses are built to ANSI standards, and ANSI standards, those are RB standards, aren't the same as the standards for traditional housing. So those are the things that you need to know in the conversation. If you decide that you're building a park model house, then there's some different things that you intend to live in it full time. There's some different conversations that you need to be having around the systems for the park model. Those are the things that are talked about in the masterclass. Those are the things that are covered in a deeper dive in the systems and building course that are the intensive that I offer, to help you navigate these choices. It's not trying to turn you into a builder. It's not trying to turn you into a builder, but it's giving you the opportunity to have the knowledge that you'll need to be able to make the right decisions. It's also it's some of the stuff that you can even transition to. I see Allison saying, I had a contractor totally ignore my design on a remodel. It is one of the things that helps you be aware, Geraldine, helps you be aware of throughout the process, so that you can call the things out as they're happening, as you're involved in the build, versus on the back end of it, things happening that you had no idea of, but they end up being something that doesn't work well for you long term. Deborah is saying, addressing housing and homelessness across the state, there's a movement for the Delaware State Housing Authority to support municipalities with local zoning reform. Yes, so that's one of the things that is happening in a lot of areas where zoning is, and I talk about this in the masterclass. The core of zoning was developed for racism. Anybody who deals with zoning can tell you that. The core of zoning was to keep people, undesirables, out of certain areas. And when zoning was first developed, zoning was written like that. They said coloreds, they might even use the N-word. Zoning outlined coloreds are not allowed in these areas. You cannot sell your house to coloreds. That zoning said that. Or I just lost my word. Oh my God, it's another word. Then it'll come to me maybe. Then later on, once they started writing laws against redlining to keep folks out of certain areas. They went in and redid zoning, changed it into single family homes in this area, blah 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 in this area. So they took out all of the racist language, but they wrote it so that if there's single family homes only allowed in this area, from a financial perspective, white people could afford single family homes. So single family homes was code word for white people will live in this area, because at the time that's who was able to get loans. You know, there was racism in mortgage loan lending, again, redlining, and zoning supported that. Covenants is the word that I was trying to get before. The covenants, housing covenants, kind of like if you think about like your HOA rules, housing covenants specified for the homeowner, the white homeowner, that houses couldn't be sold to black people. And you can look up stories where some of the white people went against their covenants and would sell to black people. Wasn't a lot, we know that. But those racist covenants, and in some areas, those covenants are still in place. Like you can go look them up, and it will specifically say black people weren't allowed to live in these particular neighborhoods. So then when zoning was the rewrite of zoning took that language out, but it still did accomplish the same thing, just with zoning. These are single family homes. This is where multifamily homes can be. Multifamily homes being more along the line of apartments and duplexes and things like that, where they know people of a lower income level will live in those types of houses. And so they have to be in this area. Mobile homes have to be in this area. Again, it was all by design of how we're zoning, because we want to keep people out of certain areas. And so there has been some work around in most of the cities and states around zoning to change a lot of the language specifically for single family homes, to break that up, change that up so that different types of housing can be located in those areas, because the understanding is that racism is what drove that. Zoning is done, the rules are made, as I always say this, the rules are made at the city and county level. So there isn't like one set of rules for North Carolina. The rules are going to be made at each city and county level. And so some of the major cities are doing that work that Deborah just called out, to rewrite the zoning and change some of this. But a lot of the work that they're doing to rewrite some of this isn't for another 10 or so years. They're doing the work now for changes in 10 years. So that's still very slow in coming. North Carolina just did or is working on a bill. I've forgotten the number of the bill, but it is around ADUs, accessory dwelling units, the houses that you can put in the backyards. They're changing the rules at the state level around ADUs, and they are pushing it out to the cities and counties for them to adopt it, which is not what is usually done. But they'll be pushing it out to cities and counties, because they're trying to impact, just what Deborah was saying, they're trying to impact the housing crisis and want to make it easier for people to build ADUs. And so some of that change is happening, but it is very slow. Hey there. It is very slow to happen. Sadiq said, I've seen a couple create standing lofts in their tiny by separating the roofs on the loft by a crane. That's interesting. again, the design of the house, what's important to you for the design of the house, that's what goes into the choices you made. If it's a tiny house on wheels, there are certain limitations to how high the tiny house can be from the ground to the top of that tiny house. By law, 13.6, 13.5, 13.6 is it, from the ground to the top of that tiny house if it's on wheels. And so if you are building on wheels, so by the time you finish with like your roofing, you've got about 11 feet inside the house to work with. And if you're going to have lofts, then that 11 feet has to be divided up with the lower level in that 11 feet. So it's very hard to be able to get a standing loft and still have adequate height in the lower level if you're building a tiny house on wheels. My thought process, I have very tall. So when I say that, let me go back. As I was designing my house, I'm 5'5". So technically, I could have divided my 11 feet 5 by 5 in the loft, 5 by 5 underneath. That would have been my 11 feet, kinda. You also have to factor in the actual loft, the material for the loft. Again, design. But I could have technically tried to design it so that I had standing room in my loft. For me, there was really no need to stand in the loft. I sleep in the loft. My loft isn't so tight that I have to crawl around, but there's no need to stand in the loft. And so for me, it was more important to have more of my height on the lower level to accommodate guests. I didn't want anybody in here to have to feel like they had to bend down to walk in my house. Like that would get old. Guests would not want to come to my house if they had to, bend over or they were hitting their head. And I wouldn't even want to see anybody walking through my house looking like that. And so even from because the other question is people ask about having sex in a tiny house. There's no need to stand in the loft. You could, everything you need to do from that perspective doesn't require standing. And you can still have enough space in the loft for that. If you want to stand and do the rest of that, there's always the downside, the downstairs. And so it is, those are the long-term decisions, things that you have to think about in your design. Design is so key to the success of your house. I remember when I first built my house, or when I was researching my house, there was a article and your roof. You mentioned the roof. The roof style that you go with is so key to the size that the space that you're gonna have in the tiny house. Again, we cover that in the master class. We cover that in your design. But I remember when I was building my house, there were some people who were in an article in the Charlotte Observer. And again, this is before tiny houses were a thing. And they had interviewed this couple who had built a tiny house, and it was a very small tiny house, probably about 18 feet long. And they had an A-frame roof. And so that is the roof that's like this. It is the roof that's going to give you the least space in a loft. Again, they had a small house, an A-frame roof, and the picture that was in this article was them sitting on the edge of their loft being interviewed. So the interviewer took a picture of them sitting on the edge of their loft. And so they shared in their interview that only one of them could sit up at a time in the loft. And I hated that article so bad. God, I hated that article because, especially at a time when people didn't understand tiny houses and they just thought people who wanted to live in tiny houses were weirdos. If you're reading an article and these people are talking about living in a tiny house and living in a tiny house full time, where only one person can sit up in the loft, is not sustainable for long-term living. That just is not sustainable. There are ways to, even if you decide to go with an A-frame, there are different things that you can do with an A-frame roof to get more space. I hated that article because it just sounded so nonsensical, and it just made anybody reading that's going to think about, what the hell are they thinking about? Only one person can sit up at a time in the bed, and this is for long-term living. One of my pet peeves. But design, the point there is design is so important. um um Deborah is saying, we're back to zoning. Deborah is saying, yes, there are not enough multi-unit housing options, particularly low income affordable housing. Absolutely. And that is by design, because multi-units mean that it is going to be lower income. People who make less money need to live in multi-unit type housing, is what the thought process was when zoning was developed. And so that is why. Val is saying, good Sunday. Eden Village, hello. Eden Village of Richmond, Virginia is establishing a new tiny home community. City Council recently approved the land sale. It's modeled after Eden in Springfield, Missouri. That's good news. Is this a tiny house on wheels community, Val? Thank you for sharing that. Got you. So it's a movable roof. Okay, Sadiq. That's going to that. I'm sure that was very expensive. Sadiq is saying the people who this was a tiny house on wheels. They designed it so that the roof apparently can move up and down. So that is some expense, obviously, and then mechanical. So you always have to hope that the mechanics of that don't ever let you down. But a very good idea. Accommodating guests, Sadiq is saying, accommodating guests is also something I think about with trying to future proof, as far as how big to build, how many rooms, and the practicalities of day-to-day living. Accommodating guests was big on, as I talk about the key components for design, knowing your why. I've always shared that my house has been one of the go-to spots for my friends for gathering, and that was one of the big things for me in the design of my home. And that is, it went so much into, and not even prior to this add-on space, the core tiny house was designed for entertaining. And that was, but again, knowing where I talk about the things that you need to know up front that lead into the design and the success of your home. Those are the things that you have to know as you're planning your design. And I again, I don't want to keep sounding like a broken record, but those are the things that I talk about in the course, because it is, if it's not something that you think about up front, I'm dropping the link for it. If it's not something that is, as you are identifying before you just jump into building, if you haven't done, or even in design, if you haven't done the core work to understand what it is, what is it that you want this house to offer you, how does this house need to serve you, if you haven't done that work up front before you even start with your design, then later on is when you start thinking about, oh, I really like to entertain, I should have included that in the design of the house, I should have thought about that in the design of the house. But at this point it's too late, because you didn't design it that way because you didn't think about it, in the beginning. And so that is why the framework that I offer exists, so that you are thinking about all of the pieces that make home for you, and including that in your thought process. um Teresa is asking, did I ever consider doing a drop axle for your home prior to the bill? My trailer, the axles on my trailer are dropped. Again, I'm not new to this. How the kids say, I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. Researching my trailer was the first step in my tiny house process before even designing my house. And I researched and sourced my trailer, and I went to pick my trailer up, and brought it to Charlotte. And it does have dropped axles, and it gives you maybe about 5 or so inches, 2 to 5 inches, depending on how it's configured in height. And so, yes, I do have a trailer with dropped axles. Absolutely. Okay, so Val is saying she's not sure about the foundations or wheels. I'm thinking it's probably on foundation. That Rosalind just confirmed that. That's what I was thinking. It was on foundation. Folks are, more open to small houses on foundation. Most of the cities, counties, a lot of them don't have a minimum square footage requirement. And so that then allows you to build a small house on foundation. It is when you start trying to do something with wheels that your challenge comes in. Thank you so much, Sadiq. This is the link. I'm talking about my courses. I want to drop the link to them so you can look at them as I keep talking about it. So step 1 is, it's 1:00. Step 1, knowing your why. Step 2, understanding your key first steps. Step 3, your design essentials. Step 4, avoiding any pitfalls with your systems. Though I mentioned I give you 4 key steps. Those are your 4 key steps. As I harp on my courses, it's important to me because I put a lot of effort into it. I want to be a source. And Evelyn, thank you for your comment earlier. I want to be a source for the movement, for this tiny house journey. My journey, as I've shared it with you all, as I've most recently also shared, post having had a stroke in 2023, my tiny house is the thing that is saving my life. And this journey for me, to live in no freedom, is the liberation that I know is needed. It's definitely the liberation that is needed in our community. And that is so much of why what I do is important to me. I feel like it is my calling. I just had this conversation with someone who attended the masterclass. This is the work that I'm here to do, and so I want to make sure I do a good job of it. And I want to be sure that I'm able to share my success so that I can give other folks the tools so that they can also be successful. I've lived in my house for 10 plus years. It's been on HGTV 3 times. I have done this work for 10 plus years successfully. And so it's not just me talking about the things that I do. It's not just me hyping myself up. I really have invested in, hey Key, good to see you. I have invested in the community in these offerings. And so Um, oh, I've done a lot with my house over the 10 years. I said I was gonna share. I think I can share a video. So y'all hold on. Let me see if I can figure out how to do that. Um, Hold on. Let me figure out. Wait. Okay. I know how to do this. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna change my screen. I'm gonna share my screen. Share my screen. Here we go. Share. Let me rewind this. I think y'all see my screen. I did this on. I'm gonna do it again. I shared this on my Instagram page. It's my journey over these 10 years of my tiny house. And so I'm going to do it again. I think y'all see my screen. I started with graph paper. I wish I could stop. Hold on. I started my design on graph paper, and then it went to actual CAD design with the help of my sister. That is SketchUp. Before I even built my house, I'm going to start it again. Designing started on graph paper. SketchUp, taken from the CAD to a 3D modeling to know what my house was going to look like before I even built it. My house turned out just like that. I told you I went and got my trailer. I insulated my trailer myself. And then building to the design of my house. And that is the very first time it went on the road. And that was my house in 2015 when it was first built. And if I started again, go back. If I started again, I want y'all to look at the SketchUp. You see the SketchUp of the house. This is obviously the interior. The SketchUp of the house. I had included a screened-in porch and a Juliet balcony. And so I'm gonna take you back to the very first time it moved. There's there's a porch and the Juliet balcony moving. There it is right there. So I knew when I first built my house what it was going to look like. And then as I've expanded and added on the sunroom and the screened in porch, I did skip a version of it where I'm going to redo this. I did skip a version of the house of another sunroom that I had, and I forgot to include that in this reel. There was another sunroom when I removed the Juliet balcony and enlarged the sunroom, and I'll share those pictures on Instagram. I forgot about those in this reel. Building a house so that it moves. That's important. Understanding how to do that. And not every builder can do that. The sunroom and the screened-in porch are built on piers. They are not built onto the tiny house. They were not built to move. My intention was not to move as I was on my friend's farm. And then I moved. And so this was December 2020, December 2024, when I decided I was moving and took the house apart. And I'm going to do that again. I want to talk about that for a minute. It doesn't have to be fancy to get started, is what my drawing on graph paper shows you. Graph paper helps you to draw to scale. And then over the years, my house, I'm trying to think of, this is my second location after I moved it from the RV park. So there's a gap in another design that I had for the screened-in porch. But like I said, this part was built on piers, not designed to move. So then I had to figure out, and when I built it on the house, I knew I did not want to build into the tiny house. I still wanted the tiny house to be mobile, just from a future perspective. But again, I wasn't planning to move, and then until I needed to move, after having had my stroke, I wanted to be in an area where I wasn't as isolated. And so let me stop share. Now I gotta figure out how to stop share. I think that's it. Okay. I wanted to be less isolated. And so as I had built the sunroom and screened-in porch, it was attached to the outside of the house, but not impacting the build of of my actual tiny house. And so that is what kind of had to be undone and moved. And so it was as I shared in the picture, it was cut away from the tiny house and then cut in half so that it could fit on on two tractor trailers, because the length of the part that I'm sitting in now, if the way it's attached to the house is like a backward L. And so it had to be cut in two, because this is too wide. This part that I'm sitting in now is too wide for the whole backward L to sit on a tractor trailer. And so it was cut across the room so that it was cut into two pieces, and both the pieces then individually put on a tractor trailer and everything. And so then the tiny house could move as it normally does. So I had drivers come in and pick that up, a tiny house delivery company come and pick the house up. The two portions of the tiny house were put on a tractor trailer, and then my shed and my outside decks were put on another tractor trailer. And so all of this moved across from one little rural area to kind of a more suburban area, so that I could be closer into community. And then it was the process of putting it all back together, like Humpty Dumpty. I took it apart and had to put it back together. And putting it back together was a process, but it also allowed me the opportunity to do some upgrades from the initial build, and focus on better attaching. And then I personally worked on my subfloor, doing some better sealing. And I did that actual work of working on my subfloor and sealing it better. So I don't talk about what I don't know. Is part of why I share that. I've actually done the work. I'll have contractors come all the time and tell me something can't be done, and I tell it absolutely can be done. I've done it. Or they'll tell me it doesn't work, that this is not how it works. Like a new contractor will come in and I'll have them working on something that's like, that doesn't work like that. It absolutely does, and it has. And then they learn something. And so that is to the share of the work and the experience that I've put into this. So if this is a tiny house is on your dream list, if you've been nodding along, if you see ways that the framework, or folks who are watching in the future, if you see ways that this framework will help you with your journey, with your roadmap, it's why I created these courses, so that you don't have to figure it all out on your own. So you don't have to waste money. You don't have to make the big mistakes that could be avoided so that you can focus on living, on bringing that dream to life. Because it's not, I always say, it's not just about the tiny house. It's really about intentional living. It's about, there's a bigger piece to just than just building a tiny house, and that's a lot of what is covered in the courses. So there are 3 courses. The masterclass, that's the 4-week kind of signature program where we cover big picture zoning, budgeting, downsizing. We talk about um, income opportunities with tiny houses, lifestyle planning, all of the things. Is where you get the clarity so that you can move forward, so that you're not second guessing every step of the way. That is the master class. It is a 4-week series. You get community with it, and you have lifetime access to your community. And it is at your own pace. Each Monday, I drop a pre-recorded course and some supporting documentations, workbook, handouts, those types of things. You go through the course at your own pace during this 4 weeks. I drop the content on Monday, you go through it. And then depending on the level, your purchase level, there is a basic level where you just have access to the course and you have access to the community. There is the premier level where you have access to the course and the community. And then at the end of the 4 weeks, there is a live session and you can ask questions all along as I'm dropping the content. You can ask questions. I'm answering questions in the community. But then at the end of the 4 weeks, there is a live session so that you can ask additional questions. The premium purchase gives you access. The premium and VIP levels give you access to that live session. It is also recorded just in case you can't attend it. You still can, and you can send in questions ahead of time so that I can answer them if you can't attend it, but you'll have access to the live session. And then the VIP level of the masterclass, you get the basic, the course, the community, the live session, and then you also have a 30-minute one-on-one call with me to talk specifics of your specific situation. In the course, I can't answer everybody's specific questions. We're talking in more generalities. I can answer some questions, but I can't go and have a conversation about, well, my land, they said blah, blah, blah. I'm not answering that level of questions, but there is the VIP level gives you the opportunity to ask those specific questions. And so that's the master class. And then, and I'm dropping the link again for the courses. And then there is the design intensive course, which is a deeper dive into the design that is covered in the masterclass. It's focusing on making sure you build intentionally. Your house fits your life. My house fits my life. It is just not a house. It is me. It is so much of who I am. Again, layouts. We talk about finishes, storage, all the decisions that are going to help you enjoy your house, where it's not just a cramped place. It's something that you enjoy. It is something that is key to supporting you and your lifestyle, and that's important. So that you can love your house. I love my house. I adore my house. And then there's the systems and building intensive, and that's where we talk about systems, toilets, plumbing, heating, electricity, on and off grid, the critical behind the scenes stuff that impact your comfort, that impact your safety, that impact your long-term cost. Not turning you into a builder. So even if you're not doing DIY, if you're doing DIY, it's definitely something you need to know. But if you're not doing DIY and you're working with the builder, it's still giving you the information so that you can ask the right questions and make your smart decisions. All of they're all fine individually. All of it together is the full roadmap. And that's what I got for you. And it's out there and available. It is, again, the thing that I wish had been available to me, and I want to make sure that I offer it to you all. It can be overwhelming. Absolutely. I've been there. But you don't have to be overwhelmed. So sign up. Get on in there. Absolutely. Teresa is saying it's amazing when something you've dreamed about for years becomes a reality. I agree with that. This is the life I dreamed about as I shared my why, because I want to live in no freedom. This is that life. This new location has taken it to what I would say the pinnacle of this. This is that. I agree, Evelyn. Thank you. It was a heavy lift. It was literally moving my house was a heavy lift. Literally, emotionally, figuratively, all of the things. It was a heavy lift. And I'm glad to be on this side of said heavy lift. Thank you, Teresa. I appreciate that. All right. Questions. Anybody have any questions? Questions about the course, maybe some high level questions that I can answer before we sign on off here. What y'all got for me? I know it's been a minute since I've done a frequently asked questions segment. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Evelyn. I've got courses. I've got consultations. I've got coaching. I've got my Patreon community. We are having an event. If you're in my Patreon community, what the Patreon obviously is by tiers. And I can't think of I think it's tier 3. It might have a name. Soul Collective 3, I believe, is the name. We're having an event in October, end of October, early November, and folks will be coming to my home, and we'll be doing some things around this area. So I'm looking forward to that. If you are in the Patreon community, their information is there for you to participate. So make sure you are joining us if you'd like to. Sadiq is asking, are there any more upcoming renovations? Absolutely not. I'm done. Ding, pick it up from In Living Color. Ding, pick it up. I'm done. I don't have anything else in here. I need to renovate. I have been working on my front yard, my prayer and meditation space. That's what I've been working on. And it's a beautiful space. If I do say so myself, I need to share some more pictures of it. That's all I'm doing. I'm not doing anything else. Your friend is tired. I just want to, I don't need another project. I recognize that I'm often in, and I enjoy this work. I enjoy the smell of new wood. I enjoy all of that. But I'm not doing another thing over here. The sister is tired. I just want to enjoy the fruits of my labor. Thank you so much, Teresa. You too. Thank you, Arnell. Day is asking, how close are you to ascertaining your tiny community? I heard you mention it. Not as close as I'd like to be. The the land that I am interested in, the owner of the land has been seriously ill, and so I've had to put it on pause, out of respect for that. And so they are doing much better, thankfully. And so I'm hoping that I'm able to restart those conversations. I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago to them, and I'm hoping to be able to restart some of those conversations. So it's not anywhere near where I want it to be right now, but still hopeful. Rosalind is saying, I'm 3 years into my tiny house journey. I feel like I'm always going to be working on it. I agree with that. I would agree with that too. In my 3 year at year 3, absolutely, I agree with that. And then you get to the point where you start. At least for me, like there were things early on, like the winterization of my tiny house, where I what was my point? Oh, the winterization. That was my point. Winterization of my tiny house. The first few years, I went with this one method, and it was more of a temporary thing. And then I realized I didn't want to keep winterizing every year, and so then I went into another mode of something that would be able to stand year round. And so it was things like that that got me out of always working on the house. And so it's coming, it's coming, where you don't always have to work on the house. And for me, it was also financial, and I know that to be part of your situation as well. If I'd had all of the money to plop down to do everything, from the beginning, that would have been one thing, but that's not how my finances are built. So sometimes things have to be done in stages. But it makes you appreciate it and love it even more. So it's coming, sis. This is my 10-year journey. So there's the time difference. Millie is asking, do you offer workshops on buying land for tiny home communities? I don't, but Deidre Kolb, who is, Jesus, what is the name of her community in Ruffton? What is Deidre's community? It's going to come to me. Hold on a minute. I'm going to look it up. Deidre is the owner of, let me just look it up. I have a working session with the Poplar Creek, Poplar Creek. It is Black woman owned. Thank you, Happy Life. I got it. Thank you so much. Poplar Creek. Deidre is working on a masterclass for that includes, because she has the tiny house community, she is working on developing a masterclass. And I know it because we meet together on Mondays and Fridays. And we are talking about the marketing of it. So it is coming soon. If you don't follow Poplar Creek on IG, do so. And I will either have her back on the channel. I'll be helping her market her course. And so that is coming. It will be available. So it is coming. So just stay tuned. I'm glad you love your house. That is beautiful. Congratulations. You maybe we can, if you're interested in sharing your house with the community, let me know. I'd love to have you on here. If that's something that you're interested in doing. Absolutely, Rosalind. And you got to take your time with that. And as a plug, so Rosalind says she's intentionally doing the build, and Rosalind lives in a school, and she says she's intentionally doing her build debt-free and enjoying thrifting and repurposing my materials. One of the things that we talk about in the masterclass is using repurposed materials and how that's going to impact your timeline and your planning. Everybody wants to do that, but it's not as easy as having all of the materials there. There's you got to find the materials oftentimes, and so that draws the process out. And like Rosalind is saying, and so all of that is the understanding how that impacts your timeline, how that impacts your budget, and being sure you understand all of that up front before you start your build. You too, Judith. I'm getting ready to say so long to y'all folks. Happy Sunday. I'm gonna drop the link again. I don't currently have a bundle out there for the courses, but if you are interested in taking multiple courses, I would absolutely offer you a bundle. So just let me know. I'm always available. You can reach out and I will offer you some discounted pricing for the bundle. Very welcome. And that's it. That's all I got for y'all. Happy Sunday. Thank y'all for being here. Join me in the masterclass or one of the other intensives. I would love to have you there. Everybody have a good week. Thank you. Thank you. I will talk to you all soon. I hope the rest of your week is good. Everybody be safe. And I will talk to y'all soon. Thank y'all.